Good morning, Africa, and welcome to this edition of Africa Good Morning, where we'll be bringing you the latest in news stories from across the African continent and beyond. My name is Glenora Shipura, and this is Aina Raiza Kweyo.
Happy Thursday, everyone. Today is World Kidney Day. The goal was to raise awareness of what our kidneys can do and what happens when they are not working properly. They strive to teach the risk factors and bring screening to those at risk of the chronic kidney disease. Prevention is the overall goal by teaching communities how to keep their risk factors as low as possible. And here is more on World Kidney Day. Welcome back to Africa Good Morning, and here are the news-making headlines. Congo militiamen killed 18 civilians in church compound. Militiamen have killed 18 civilians who had sought refuge in a church compound in eastern Congo, a witness and local human rights group said yesterday. The attack took place in a district in the conflict region, Ituri province, as the victims slept in churches outside their buildings. They had fled there after escaping from previous attacks, the source said. A survivor, Agustin Kolo, was sleeping with his family when he heard the cries from outside. I quickly got up and woke up my family and my 2 children to flee. This is how we were saved as 18 of our brothers and sisters were killed, he said.
Now, in our next story, Russia uncovers U.S.-linked bioweapon facility in Ukraine and demands explanation. Now, Russia yesterday made claims that it has uncovered U.S.-linked bioweapon facilities in Ukraine, apparently solely intended for military use. Now, as a result, Moscow is demanding that the United States explain to the world why it had supported what Moscow cast as a military biological program in Ukraine involving deadly pathogens, including plague and anthrax. Now, Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said that Washington owes Moscow and the world an explanation. She demanded transparency from Washington over the allegation, which is denied by Kyiv and which a Pentagon spokesperson has described as absurd. Now, on Tuesday, U.S. Under Secretary of State for Political Affairs Victoria Nuland admitted that Ukraine has biological research facilities and that Washington was working with Ukraine to prevent the facilities from falling into Russian forces' hands.
In our next story, Sudanese protesters faced tear gas at Women's Day rally. Sudanese protesters marching against military rule on the International Women's Day were met with tear gas as they approached the presidential palace on Tuesday, Reuters said. Women's Rights Group has called the protest, along with neighborhood resistance committees, to have been organizing street demonstrations since the military took power in October. The coup put an end to a power-sharing arrangement between civilians and the military that was struck after former President Omar al-Bashir, who ruled for 30 years, was toppled in a 2019 uprising in which women played a prominent role. Women's demands are the revolution's demand, said the protest banner. After the rally reached the presidential palace in the capital Khartoum, security forces chased protesters back into the nearby streets.
Now, Zimbabwe clinics grapple as hundreds of nurses relocate to the UK. Now, reports of lack of enough nurses in both public and private hospitals in Zimbabwe have been making headlines in southern African country. Now, several media reports indicate that hundreds of nurses have relocated to the United Kingdom, Ireland, or in neighboring countries like South Africa for a greener pasture. Now, media reports have further pointed out that some private and public hospitals are now operating at 50% capacity in recent months. Now, the UK has been conducting a recruitment drive to supplement its medical professionals who were impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and the Brexit. Now, according to Zimbabwe's Health Service Board, over 2,200 medical personnel left its services in 2021 alone. These included 900 nurses. This was twice the number of practitioners who left in 2020 and 3 times that of the year before. Zimbabwe nurses are lowly paid, with the lowest at a paltry $200, an amount that isn't enough to sustain a living in a country that has suffered hyperinflation for the past decade.
Cheetahs endangered in Horn of Africa due to smuggling. Cheetahs are the rarest biggest cat in Africa, with fewer than 7,000 alive in the wild. Cheetahs are frequently poached from the Horn of African countries such as Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia, according to the center. Instability and high levels of poverty have enabled illegal business to thrive in recent years, leading to a drop in the number of cheetahs in the wild. Cheetahs face a very hard life once they are in the hands of poachers and smugglers. The conditions for trafficking these animals are usually poor, and many of the cubs end up dying before they have even reached their destination. More news coming up after the break.
Welcome back to Africa Good Morning. We now tackle the second batch of our news stories. Now, Human Rights Watch urges release of 2 Sudanese arrested for government criticism. Now, Human Rights Watch has called for the release of a clergyman and a university professor in South Sudan, both detained since last year for criticizing the government. Now, HRW called for the charges against the 2 to be dropped, saying the arrests were a systematic intimidation of civil society and an attempt to suppress free speech. Both men have been accused of sabotage and undermining South Sudan's constitution. They face the death penalty or life imprisonment if convicted, their lawyers say. Now, last year, Abraham Chol Akesh, a Juba-based leader of Kwash International Ministries, was arrested at his home by the police days after the 69-year-old had told his congregation during a Sunday service that both President Salva Kiir and his deputy Riek Machar would be unseated from office on July 9th. Now, weeks later, Kaul Aguer Kaul, professor of the economics at Stratford International University in South Sudan and a former governor of North Bahar al-Ghazal state, was picked up at a patrol station by the Secret Service. This was days after the 66-year-old and other members of the People's Coalition for Civil Action, a group of critics, had advocated for government reforms in a memo published online.
In our next story, young Cabo Delgado refugees offered hope in conflict-hit Mozambican province. Afghanistan, against significant odds, about 250 youth from refugees communities in the oil and gas-rich province Cabo Delgado, Mozambique, have graduated in various technical jobs. The region has been the scene of the Islamic insurgency since 2017. The graduates received certificates in metalwork, brickmaking, bricklaying, plumbing, carpentry, electrical installation, amongst other skills. They had attended the Alberto Casimo Institute for Professional Training and Labor Study Institute in Pemba, the provincial capital of Cabo Delgado. In a statement, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees said the qualifications will help the youth find a job market suited for their skills.
Now moving on to our next story, Germany's cabinet approves scraping off Nazi-era abortion law. Now Germany's cabinet has approved legislation that will do away with the Nazi-era law forbidding doctors from providing information about abortions. Now the bill put forward by Justice Minister Marco Buschmann on Wednesday must now be debated by both houses of parliament. Doctors in Germany are allowed to say they offer terminations of pregnancies, but are not allowed to provide any further information on such procedures. Now, critics have said the law makes it too difficult for women to access information about which procedures are available and who provides them. The new government laid out its plans to eliminate the law in the coalition agreement signed in November last year. Now, in Germany, where the government was led by the conservative Christian Democrats for some 16 years until a center-left coalition came to power in December, abortion is illegal in principle, but not punishable under certain conditions. Now, a woman may have an abortion within the first 12 weeks of pregnancy if she seeks counseling and presents a certificate to the doctor.
In our next story, South Africa's Aspen signs a deal with J&J to sell COVID vaccine. South African drug maker Aspen Pharmacare has announced an agreement with the American multinational Johnson & Johnson to package, sell and distribute the latest COVID-19 vaccine under its own brand in Africa. Aspen had begun discussions with J&J in November for a licensing deal that would give it the freedom to sell and distribute the vaccine under its own brand. Aspen said in a statement that the deal also allows it to discuss the expansion of the agreement to include any new version of the drug substance, such as those developed for new variants or different formulation for the administration as a booster.
Now, Nigeria's government makes a U-turn on gender bills, new voting to follow. Now, Nigeria's House of Representatives may have buckled under pressure from women across the country, rescinding its resolution on 3 gender bills it earlier threw out at a constitutional amendment session. Now, women are arguing that the bills would give them leverage in the political development of the country. Now, the decision announced by the House of Representatives is an about turn on Parliament's March 1, 2022 decision. It will now reconsider its decision in a month when it reconvenes for another parliamentary session. Now, the National Assembly voted against a bill providing for affirmative action for women in political parties administration. Now, the lawmakers also voted against the bill to create a special seats for women in the national and state assemblies. Now, the decision as it currently stands means that women are denied 35% appointed positions, 35% affirmative action in party administration and leadership. Now, the decision came as women again stormed the National Assembly yesterday in protest against the rejection of the bills in the 2 chambers of the National Assembly.
Well, after the break, we'll listen to what a cannabis advocate has to say. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Africa. Good morning and thank you for staying with us. Now, up next, the Namibia Tourism Expo was officially launched in Windhoek yesterday. The event is a big promoter of Namibia's tourism and stakeholders are glad to have the event back on the calendar after it was cancelled last year due to the COVID-19 restrictions. Let's take a look at some of the highlights at the launch.
We need to work together to achieve these objectives. I would like to inform you that the Ministry, through its Directorate of Tourism and Gaming, has formulated the National Tourism Recovery Plan for the next 3 years to be launched in the first quarter of 2022. The plan sets priorities for policies and strategic interventions required to reboot the sector It is important to note that at this juncture, therefore, the public and the private sector, the key stakeholder, creative industries, must work together with the ministry to support the recovery initiatives and to ensure successful implementation of the planned programs and activities in the next 3 years. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me in conclusion to once again congratulate Namibia Media Holdings for creating a sectoral platform such Namibian Tourism Expo, where companies, especially those in the sector, as well as those that wish to venture in the tourism sector, can showcase their products and services, network, exchange ideas and innovations, and learn new trends of post-COVID-19 to improve the way we do the tourism business in Namibia. I'm privileged to officially announce and launch the Tourism Expo calendar events of 2022.
Our focus, and it still is going forward, was then to move into youth and tourism. In the meantime, COVID did happen, as you quite rightly know, and we were required, is maybe the right word, because force sounds like a war, and I don't want to talk war today. We're required to realign our strategy to understand that COVID's disruption is not just something that's going to be here and then gone. It is a reality that we're going to have to work with for some time. So the word sustainable all of a sudden was no longer just saving the rhino or the elephant. It was to save an entire industry that was on the brink of collapse. And although we're not invested in any establishment at all as Namibia Media Holdings, we are partners like no other business that's not invested. And we had to go and say, how do we make a model work going forward in terms of tourism, in terms of reaching people so that people can support our country, and more specifically, countries 10 degrees south of the equator. And that's where the concept of 10 degrees south came. I think it's more valid now than ever before that how we will find a sustainable tourism model to replace the current disruption that COVID-19 and the war in Europe will have an impact on us, is to make sure that and I'm not a very good politician, that's why I don't like using the word SADC countries, but as SADC countries, we work in inter-tourism engagements. So that's where we are now, actively finding ways, how do we get tourists from Botswana, from South Africa, from Zimbabwe, from Angola, from Zambia, our neighboring countries to support us. Unfortunately, cars and planes have to travel both ways. So I think what has changed is our understanding of how do we support these countries as well. And we have to find ways of not just requesting people to come to our country, but also how do we find ways of promoting to go to countries.
Welcome back to Africa. Good morning. Now, the Zimbabwe Energy Regulatory Authority has increased fuel prices hardly a week after another upward review. Talen Gore in the House of Stone has more on this story. Good morning, Talen. Please tell us about this.
Good morning, Aina. Good morning, Glenora. So the Zimbabwe Energy Regulatory Authority has increased fuel prices for the second time barely a week after an upward review, attributing the hike to surging international oil prices. Addressing a press conference in Harare yesterday after the ZERA announced the price hike, Energy Minister Soda Jemu said that Zimbabweans must use public transporter Zupco to escape high fuel prices and warned of weekly increases. He said that Zimbabweans must make use of the Zupco buses that the government has provided to commute from and to work if they cannot afford to fuel up their cars. He also said that we are going to be watching what the international arena in regards to oil will be like. So he said that everyone is affected by this oil situation, but if we can have the fuel, those that can afford can always continue to drive their cars, but those that cannot afford, they have to park their cars and use public transport to commute to work. And he said that this will also allow people not to move unnecessarily to and from to wherever they'll be going.
All right. Now, in your next story, Newsroom Africa correspondent Zolizani Nkope appeared before Harare magistrate charged with armed robbery and possession of firearms. Can you tell us more?
Newsroom Africa correspondent Xolisani Ncube has appeared before a Harare magistrate yesterday charged with armed robbery and possession of firearms. Ncube, who is 35, was arrested last week after his relative, who is a notorious armed robber, was found at his Waterfalls home in Harare. Ningomasha, who was the notorious robber, was shot and injured during the raid at Ncube's home. So he is currently in hospital under police custody, and Ncube was remanded in custody to March 17 for trial date. During the raid, police allegedly recovered 22 Bruno rifles, a 357 Magnum revolver, a 38 Special Taram revolver, and they also recovered 10 times 9 times 99 millimeters round of ammunition. And Ningomasha was mostly raiding. The notorious robber was mostly residing in South Africa, and he was notorious for raiding Zimbabwe in Harare and in Bulawayo. He has been on the police wanted list for a very long time. So we are very happy that this notorious robber was caught by the police.
All right, the Medicine Control Authority of Zimbabwe has deregistered more than 200 specific makes and tablet sizes of some drugs. Why is this?
So the Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe has deregistered more than 200 specific makes and tablet sizes of some drugs, saying that the move has nothing to do with safety, but it is purely a marketing by those who make and those who supply the by those who make or supply the market no longer having a market for the products or no longer having the registered brand for sale. So the authority gazetted the deregistration of around 200 medicines as well as the withdrawal of a number of medicines submitted for registration. Speaking to the media, the MCAZ head of evaluation and registering said that the decision was informed by some suppliers who were bringing in alternative drug, assuring the nation that it is nothing amiss. So he said that this was a normal process, which entails that when medicines are approved, cancelled, refused, or withdrawn from the public, the authority has to publish that information. So this has nothing to do with the safety of the people, but rather they are saying that there is no longer a market for those drugs and they are bringing in alternative drugs.
All right, Talent, thank you very much for coming to Africa Good Morning and disseminating that information.
You're welcome, and thank you very much for having me.
This is still Africa Good Morning, and when we return from the break, your economic news, but first, the weather.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with Africa Good Morning. Now, before we head on over to our economic news stories, we go to Gaborone, Botswana, speaking to Masego Mohwasa, our correspondent there. Good morning.
Good morning to you in studio, and good morning, Africa.
All right. Now, in your first story, new power stations to improve supply of electricity. Can you tell us more?
Yes, new power substations in Muchudi and Lopeng are to improve the power supply to the two villages. Power cuts in the villages of Muchudi and Lopeng will soon be a thing of the past following the construction of two substations which will improve electricity supply in the area. The Ministry of Mineral Resources, Green Technology, and Energy Security, Lefoko Moahi, when making budget submissions for his ministry in Parliament, says power utility, also known as BPC, will complete construction of the two substations in these villages before April this year. He said already one substation in Ramata has been completed. It has improved electricity supply in that village. The villages have been experiencing constant power failures, especially during rainy seasons. Mwari further said government has put aside over 50 million pula to electrify villages around the country.
All right, Masego, in some good news, the government of Botswana wants to expand rather or improve the students' experiences by building more classrooms. Please tell us about this.
Yes, the construction of many of the schools is already underway because the government wants to improve public primary school intake capacity this year. The Ministry of Local Government is building new primary schools around the country in a bid to enhance current capacities in primaries as well as improve learner experiences. Local Government Minister Khotla Augetse says the initiative will assist the government to improve a conducive environment in all primary schools and also improve access to basic education. The minister said the construction, expansion, and maintenance of primary schools rather, will be done through the Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan for 2022.
Now, I understand that local enterprise authorities spends millions to keep thousands of companies afloat. Can you tell us more?
Yes, in our last story, LEA, also known as Local Enterprise Authority, spent millions to capacitate over 45,000 enterprises. LEA has disbursed 45 million pula to just over 45,700 businesses, and the Minister of Trade, Investment, Trade and Industry, Musi Khafela, yesterday shared this in Parliament when presenting budget proposals for the 2022-2023 financial year. Khafela said 45 million disbursed to enterprises is from the 100 million pula allocated to LEA under the industry facility of the Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan. The facility seeks to assist businesses address the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. That brings me to the end of our stories for today. That's it from Botswana, and back to you in studio.
Thank you so much, Masego, for joining us on this lovely Thursday morning and for disseminating that information.
Yes, and I hope you all enjoy your weekend. And once again, good morning, Africa.
All right. Up next, economic news right after the break.
Choose your flex package with Paratus today. Sign up for ultra-fast fiber with the convenience of mobile LTE. That's 2 products in one bundle. It's new, it's one bill, and you can stay connected in more than one location.
For more information, visit paratus.africa/NA.
Always prepared. Paratus.
Welcome back to Africa. Good morning. Now let's take a look at our economic news stories. Now, many of the world's biggest firms have abandoned Russia. 10 of them wrote off $30 billion in 3 days. Now, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has elicited widespread condemnation from governments and companies around the world. Now, Russian banks have been banned from the SWIFT international payment system. The central bank cannot access most of its $630 billion foreign currency arsenal. The asset of prominent oligarchs are being seized, and shares in the country's biggest companies have been ditched from major indices. Now, in the oil and gas sector, BP, Shell, and Exxon alone had written off around $30 billion in investment in Russia, one of the biggest energy exporters. Now, some of the largest companies too have either exited Russia completely or suspended business activity, including Apple, which has stopped selling its product to Russia. Now, energy companies have been Russia's most significant investors and took the lead in cutting ties with the world's third largest oil producer.
In our next story, central bank outlines banking sector risks. The Reserve Bank of Malawi says the banking sector remains susceptible to downward risk which threatens its performance this year. This is despite the sector being seen as one of the most resilient industries in the economy. The risks outlined in RBM's 2021 Financial Stability Report include sectorial credit concentration, single-name credit concentration, tight liquidity, and the COVID pandemic. On sectoral credit concentration, the central bank says the sector which accumulated more loans, the community, social and personal service sectors, seconded by wholesale and retail trade sectors, then the agricultural sector, which are vulnerable to non-performing loans.
Now, world heading for 1973 type energy shock, says French minister. Now, the spike in energy prices caused by Russia's war in Ukraine will produce effects comparable to the 1973 oil shock, when French Economy Minister Bruno Le Maire warned on Wednesday. Now, the current energy crisis was comparable in intensity, in brutality to the oil shock of 1973, Le Maire told a conference in Paris. Now, in 1973, as you know, the response caused an inflationary shock, leading central banks to massively increase their rates, which killed off growth, Le Maire added. Now, the first oil shock in the early 1970s was caused by the Yom Kippur War, when Egyptian and Syrian forces launched an offensive against Israel. Now, 6 Arab members of the OPEC oil cartel declared an embargo on exports to countries supporting Israel, notably the United States. Now, they quadrupled the oil prices to $11.65 a barrel, provoking recessions in Western countries and steep inflation. European wholesale gas and crude oil have rocketed to record or near record prices this week due to the supply fears linked to Russia's February 24 invasion of Ukraine. Now, the US and UK announced Tuesday they were cutting off Russian energy imports in response to the war, triggering another surge in prices. And the price of Brent crude, the international benchmark, was up at almost $130 per barrel on Wednesday.
In our next story, Kenya, we are holding to convert solid waste into electricity in Kakamega. A solid waste-to-energy project is starting in Kakamega 7 years after its official presentation. The Swedish energy company VR Holding AB has been appointed by the Kenyan government to carry out the work, which will cost 6 billion Kenyan shillings or about $53 million. Kenya will soon have a new solid waste-to-energy plant. The facility will be located in Kakamega County. The project is being implemented by VR Holding AB. The Bastard, Sweden-based energy company is implementing the project at a cost of 6 billion Kenyan shillings, about $53 million. Our goal is to reduce the cost of electricity bills to 50% in Kakamega, says Oporanya, the country governor of Kakamega. Coming up next is your economic indicators.
Меня зовут Маша, мне 9 лет, я живу в Красногоровке, у меня все хорошо. Кушать у нас есть, пить у нас есть, сахар у нас есть, все есть. Только дров не хватает. На буржуйке, когда у нас есть, вот эти мы дрова пособираем, закинем, оно горит. Например, в 10 запалили, в 11 закончили, вода нагрелась, и все, и мы купаемся.
В наш дом 4 было прямых попаданий, так что мы боимся. Человека даже осколками поранило, забрали в больницу с 6-го подъезда соседа, так что мы тоже боимся. У нас много деток, деваться нам некуда, нас никто нигде не ждет.
Когда вырасти, я хочу найти работу такую, чтобы я помогала людям, которые бедные, там.
Thank you for staying with Africa Good Morning. We now bring you the latest in sports news brought to you by our correspondent, Ari Hochard. Let's have a look.
Good day everyone, it's time for international sport and we start off with the Cricket World Cup for Women that's taking place in New Zealand at the moment. It's a 50-over tournament and the news from the tournament is that the West Indies, they secured another big win in the tournament. They beat England by 7 runs and early in the tournament, in the opening game actually, the West Indies played against New Zealand, the host, and they beat them also in the first game. So 2 great wins, big wins for the West Indies in the opening rounds of the round robin. For what happened in the game was that the West Indies, they batted first. They made 225 for the loss of 6 wickets in their allotted 50 overs. And then England were bowled out for 219 in their chase for the runs. England have a difficult task now to qualify, as only top 4 of the 8 teams will go through to the semi-finals, and England's next game will be against South Africa. That will be on Monday, and South Africa first have to play Pakistan, and that game will be on Friday. The England men's team, they're currently touring in the West Indies, and the 5-day test started in Antigua, and day 1 it was England that batted first. They ended the day on 268 for the loss of 6 wickets. They were in trouble earlier, but then a good innings by Johnny Bairstow. He made 109 unbeaten runs and he will continue batting on day 2. Another 5-day test taking place in the men's circuit is Australia that played against Pakistan. It was in Rawalpindi, quite a flat pitch and lots of runs, not many wickets. It ended in a draw, and the second test between Australia and Pakistan, that will be played in Karachi and that will start on Saturday. And now tennis news, and it's Novak Djokovic, the world number 2, that's in the news again. He entered the Indian Wells, a tennis tournament that's going to be played in California. It's part of the Masters series, and that is despite not being vaccinated. So the US regulations at the moment is that non-US citizens need to be vaccinated to enter the country. So there's no news from the US government at the moment, but at the moment, as it stands, Novak Djokovic is in the draw. He's the 2nd seed, and he's got a bye in the first round. So it will still be seen if the US authorities will allow Novak Djokovic to play in the Indian Wells tournament. Other tennis news is that the world number 3, that's Alexander Zverev, he's been handed a suspended 8-week ban, and that was for incident at the Mexican Open where he hit the umpire's chair with his racket. So that effectively means if he transgresses in the same way in future, he will be handed an 8-week ban, and then he might miss tournaments like the French Open or Wimbledon. Now we continue with some cycling news. It is the Paris-Nice cycle tour that's taking place at the moment. It was stage 3. It was quite a flat stage. There was 1 or 2 hills that they had to go over, but it came down to a sprint, and in the end it was Mats Petersen of Norway. He won in 4 hours 23 minutes. In second place was Brian Coquart of France, and then in third place was Wout van Aert of Belgium. In the general classifications, it is still Christopher Laporte of France that is the leader. He actually had a fall with less than 500 meters to go in stage 3, but the rules are if you fall within the last 500 meters of the finish line, you get the time of the peloton. So Laporte is still leading. His combined time is 14 hours 34 minutes at the moment. He is just 1 second ahead of Wout van Aert of Belgium, and then in third place it is Primož Roglič. He is in third position at the moment. The fourth stage will be a time trial, a shorter time trial that will be over 13.4 kilometers. And now to conclude the international sports news, we go to some football news or some soccer news. It was Champions League action in the week, and it was Liverpool that hosted Inter Milan, and it was a loss for Liverpool. They lost at home by 1-0, but they carried an aggregate of 2-0 into this game after they beat the Italians in the first leg by 2-0. So on aggregate, it was Liverpool that went through to the semi-final of the Champions League by 2-1. Another Champions League game that was played was Bayern Munich that played in Munich against Salzburg. They were way too strong and they beat Salzburg by 7-1. The first leg was 1-1 in Salzburg, but aggregate is 8-2 in favor of Bayern Munich, and they also go through to the semi-final. So it is 4 very strong teams that will go through to the Champions League semi-finals. Liverpool and Bayern Munich already confirmed. Manchester City, they're holding a 5-0 aggregate, that is against Sporting, so they will probably go through as well very easily. And then the fourth position will be between the winner of PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, and also Real Madrid. So 4 strong teams that will be in the semi-finals of the Champions League. So that's the sporting news, international sports news for today. Hope you have a great day. We talk again tomorrow. All the best. Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, welcome to another exciting edition.
Women's Day for me is all about celebrating the achievements of women. In my opinion, Women's Day would be literally every single day. And I think it's very important for us to be able to amplify women wherever we go. So be it if you are a family member, if you're a man or a woman, it's important for you to be able to help us close that gender gap. Being a woman is absolutely phenomenal. If you put something in a woman's hands, if you want change, the best place to put it is in the hands of a woman. And honestly, we have earned our LP and should be celebrated for it. When I think about my education as a child, I think I had the best of both worlds. I had both the African education and culture, and I also had the Western education. When I look at Africans now and I see my people being able to explore themselves, I see families equally supporting their children, this really, really warms my heart because I am able to see Africa on a global scale. It just makes me think about how much we have to offer, and I really, really and truly can't wait for the world to see the best of Africa. When an African girl has been given the same opportunity, it means that she can run with it. It means that she can do great things. When I think about education in Africa, I think that it is extremely important that we continue to push this force. You know, knowledge, as they say, is power, and everything starts with a thought. It starts with the ability to be able to critically think and problem solve and process situations. I'm looking forward to a future in Africa where education is no longer a struggle. It's no longer something that we have to advocate for, but it becomes free, it becomes easily accessible, and it becomes something that we can really appreciate as Africans. The first tip I will give to a young Zainab or a young person hoping to chase their dreams will be to most definitely enjoy the moment. It's very important for you to just really appreciate and be grateful for all your successes. It's great to be an overachiever. It's great to be someone who has all these big aspirations. But what I believe is probably more important is somebody who has an attitude of gratitude. The next tip I will give, I would say it's important for you to write down your dreams, because when you take something out of your head and you put it on paper, there's something about that that makes it real. There's something about that that says, that tells the universe and tells everyone and everything around you that, hey, this person is ready. So it's always good to visualize where you want to be, what you want to do, and to put it on paper and make it happen. The third tip that I think that I can offer to a young Zainab or a young creative chasing their dreams is to not take no for an answer. On this journey, you're going to meet so many people who will tell you that you're not good enough, it's not your time, you're not the right person or the right fit. But if you really believe that this is your passion, this is what you were built and born to do, then it's important that you grow that thick skin to people who tell you no. It's important that you hear what they say, but you don't let it sit in your heart. Some people will say no, but you will get to a point where somebody says yes. So keep pushing.
Welcome back to Africa Good Morning. Thank you very much for joining us. If you've missed our top stories, here are the headlines. Congo militiamen kill 18 civilians in church compound. Russia uncovers US-linked bioweapon facility in Ukraine and they are demanding for an explanation. Zimbabwe clinics grapples as hundreds of nurses relocate to the UK. Many of the world's biggest firms have abandoned Russia. Central Bank outlines banking sector risks. And those have been our stories.
And with that, we've come to the end of our show. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Thursday morning. Now, do remember that Africa Good Morning is repeated on our 1UP2 website and on our DSTV channel 285 between 8:30 and 9:30 a.m. Now, and if you have any comments regarding our program, do share them with us on our Facebook and Twitter pages. And also, if you happen to have videos or photos of happenings in your parts of Africa, do share them with us and we'll gladly include them in our program. My name is Glenora Shipura and this is Aina Raiza Kweyo.
It's all my love, all my light.